Good evening, good peoples. I wanted to get in here with Roundhill on their weekly dividends, right? So right now we've got three, at least from Roundhill. We got some copycats coming from Max, but right now Roundhill is the game. All right, so let me jump in here. Let me give you the distributions individually in comparison, then I'll go into yield and so forth. So what we see here, the way I broke this down is, and you guys are used to it, if you're not, basically I do the S&P 5 and 500, then I do the NASDAQ 100, and then I do the newer Russell. And what I've been doing is tracking the change in the Xdte price over on the right-hand column. And obviously in the distribution, which is weekly, I summarize all of those. And if I see a real low one, like we got this 19 and then we got an 18, I'll go back in here and I'll show in yellow all the ones that were lower or similar priced. And so that gives you an idea, it's kind of like looking at something and saying, hey, that's the top bottom 10% payout amount, or that's the highest payout yet, right? So then I could highlight all the other ones that were close to somebody getting an all-time weekly high payer. Like this one here, this 41 cents was a pretty significant payer. Yeah, I don't see any higher. So remember, all of these have been going since I think March 7th or March 9th. Yeah, March 7th, and then 2 weeks later, they have enough collected to pay out. So here we have 22 cents, 0.228813. All right. So call it 23 cents rounded. That's an annualized yield of 22.75. Okay, and where do we get that number on yield? I used the closing price, right? And so your yield, if you bought this thing at 40, you obviously have a higher yield, right? So yield's relative, but even with the fund, they will show the current price, okay, to determine an annualized yield. You take that payment and multiply it times 52 to get it. Okay, I'm trying to be cognizant. I know you guys sometimes I hover over what needs to be shown. So I'm learning, guys. So 0.228813, 22.75 yield. Now the fund was down 0.36 compared to last week. All right, let's jump down to Qdte, which typically is higher yielding, right, and a lower purchase price, right? The stock price is lower, therefore, even the same payment, they're a penny less, and their yield is higher. And that also dropped. It dropped 44 cents. No biggie on that. All right, so let's jump to Rdte, the new one, and see how we're doing on that guy. Well, and so what have we gotten paid? I'll show you this on my summary sheet for overall what I call total return. $8.71. Sorry, guys, before I jump into the Russell. $8.71 on the NASDAQ 100. $6.82 over here. So you'll notice when we summarize, you have a higher priced item or stock. You have a lower yield because you're earning less money. Okay. That's because the NASDAQ 100 has done pretty well this year. There may be times that the S&P 500 outperforms, clearly. All right, so let's take a look. This is only a second payment, right? Because we got started back around 9/7, I think was the inception date. We'll have it on the next page. But we went up 2.6 cents, right? Last week we paid 36 cents. Oh, and by the way, let me go up to the top here. They're all the same, but I always put declare date, ex-dividend date, and pay date, just as a summary. Most of you know this. So declaration date, or the date they declare, that's October 2. Well, technically, they declare a little before midnight into the late evening on the 1st. They just need a closing price on the 1st. Therefore, that's what we use here. Then the Xdte, so that means if you want this dividend and you don't currently own Xdte, Rdte, or Qdte, then you need to purchase them on Wednesday, October the 2nd, anytime. If you purchase on the 3rd, even in the pre-market, you will not get paid. Likewise, if you decide, hey, I want to sell it, I see the market is bearish, but I wanted to collect my dividend. Now, what will it do on 10/3? It will drop by 0.228813 in the pre-market. So when you see on the 3rd in the pre-market, you'll see the built-in drop. All dividend stocks behave this way. It's normal. Now, the higher the dividend, the more noticeable. If it's a monthly payer and they're paying $3 and the stock's 29 and you see it drop to 26, you're like, oh, what happened? Why is it down? Well, duh, it's distribution. It's ex-dividend date. Okay, guys, got that out of the way. So you will be paid on the 4th. Well, when is the 4th? It looks like it's Friday to me. So buy on Wednesday, get paid on Friday. Not bad. Now, if you already own it, you just care about the amount. All right, guys, let's finish up here. Here's our Russell. So we've now been paid 74.66, almost 75 cents rounded. And look at our annualized yield. Not bad, right? 45. We're up here in the 20s there. Now, granted, a couple of nice payments, and you extrapolate that, that should be 26 weeks now. Yeah, well, I see what I did. Yeah, that's the yield based on that payment. Okay, no worries. My next column and page is what you care about to compare overall. All right, guys, let's go to it. And again, if you know this, great. If you don't, let me go over the meaning. All right, so I have Xdte, Qdte, and Rdte, better known as S&P 500, NASDAQ 100, Russell 2000. Here's to kick off the inception date, okay? I always show the inception price. I know guys will say to me, but Bruce, I don't own it at that price. Well, guess what? If 2,000 viewers view this video, how would I know what you bought it at? You need to keep track of that, right? I've offered a free spreadsheet that does all these calculations and you plug in the numbers. Just go out there on one of my videos back some 6 months ago, 5 months ago, and I say, hey, free spreadsheet, click here, right? And it does all the formulas for date. The one thing you have to annualize anything is the days owned. That's the key. Otherwise, you're not going to get an accurate annualized number. Okay. It's easy when you have a yield and you say, hey, I'm paid once a week. I just multiply that times 52 and divide by the price of the stock. And that gives me, but that doesn't tell me after 6 weeks of collecting dividends. So here's a perfect case, right? There's $6.83 that we've now collected on Xdte. So where do I get that? I get it in all of these, right? Here's my $6.82. So every time it's paid, I track it and I add it all up and I come over here. So there's a lot of data here. May not look like it, but there's a lot of calculations. So this is only just as a reference point. It doesn't matter if you invested 10,000, a million, 1,000, whatever. It's just going to change what it shows you, whether you have a gain or a loss relative to the underlying. Did it go up or did it go down? So let's take Xdte, which typically is fairly stable. So if you bought it, again, I know you guys have different prices, but if you bought it, I have to use some price, right? So no matter what one I pick, somebody's going to say, but Bruce, I target to get in at low. Well, great, good for you, but I can't know what 2,000 people do. So I'm going to continue to use the inception price, right? So there's your investment, 1,000. What's the current price? Look at how close that is. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to say, hey, that's pretty stable. Yeah. So on my gain or loss, I have a 0.32 of 1%. Not much, right? I bought it for $52.46 times however much I invested, and I can sell it for $52.29 for however much I invested. So therefore, on $1,000, you're down $3.24 in your gain. Do I have a gain or do I have a loss if I sold? Right? Didn't say you had to. And now, so we go over here and we do two calculations and then we turn them into annualized. So the $3.24 that, or sorry, the 0.32, which is on $1,000, $3.24. But this is what we care about. So 0.32, okay, on my gain or loss, since it's already been 209 days, right? And 182 and a half days is halfway. So I only have an annualized gain or loss of 0.57. Nebulous, really. It doesn't really matter, does it? But in order to be accurate, we need to use it. So now we know by the stock going from 52.46 to 52.29, we've lost $3.24 over 209 days. So in a year, we would lose 0.57, a half of 1%, right? And the value of what we paid for the stock. Well, how'd we do on our dividend return? Well, we got $6.83 on something that we paid $52.46 for. So that says we've got a 13.01 dividend yield in 209 days. What if that was annualized? What if it kept the same pace up at the end of 365 days, and we'd have a 22.73% annualized dividend? And what did we lose in the fair value of the stock? 0.57. So therefore we get 22.16. So I know I really drilled down on this, and this is key, I think, for you guys. So essentially, this is my dividend annualized, and this is my gain or loss annualized. Okay. So at first blush, everybody looks at Qdte and says, oh, it's always been a cheaper stock, right? $42 versus $52 currently. Okay. But it was 46 in Inception. It's now 42. So that loss is 9.17. And when you annualize that, that's 16.02. So I had basically a 0.5% loss in the NAV price of the underlying. Here I had 16%. And I know there's guys out there that say, I don't care about that. I just want ROI. Well, I care about it. And you should care about it. Because anybody that looks at this should say, what was my dividend return annualized, which is 32.76. And what did I lose in the underlying price? About half that. So I ended up with a 1674 net return. Yeah, I know if the stock goes back up to 46.44, then I got the full amount, but it's not right now. So you have to report it as you see it. Okay. So effectively, Xdte currently, in my opinion, on total return is outperforming Qdte, not in its dividend, right? 32% versus 22%, but it doesn't take a hit on the NAV. All right, now why is this so outsized? Because the sample size, guys. Last week it was even worse. So we only have 2 payments, right? And we're close enough that look at this. It started at 42, so anything can happen in 22 days, right? It's 44.12, so it's got a whopping 5% gain in 22 days, which says annualized, that's 83.74. I'm on my way to doubling the price of the underlying. Now, probably not going to happen. That's why when you have a small sample size, that's why a lot of these institutions can't go out and buy some of these income products because they don't have a 3-year track record, peoples. It's just people like to see something perform. I mean, even 1 year is not a sample size. If you go out and you take the S&P 500, and again, this is a guess because I don't know the exact number, but if you go back 100 years on the S&P 500, they're probably going to tell you that its average gain is somewhere between 8 and 11%. Okay, I guess 8%, but it's going to be in there over 100 years. Well, what do you think that's made up of? Has it ever gone up 100% in a year? Probably. Has it ever gone down 70% in a year? Yeah. So, it's kind of like, think of it as roulette, red and black. You walk up the table and you see somebody, you see them spin the wheel and they get 5 reds in a row. And you go, okay, a black is due. Logically, that makes sense, but it doesn't always work that way. You may get 11 reds in a row and you may get a green, right? That's why they win, because it's only 96 or 98% that you get a red or a black. There's that 1 to 2% that you get a double zero green. I can't picture it at the moment, but that's how gambling and betting works, right? You play the odds. So I always tell people it depends on your horizon, which leads me into this. I'm going to finish this. As many of you have probably noted that subscribe to me, some of you left when I said this, other people have joined. I'm going to move to a more generalized talk about how to make money in the markets, what these funds pay, which ones are good, which ones I like, which sectors are going to be good over the next 8 years. And in order to do that effectively for a lot of you guys, I'm going to build a questionnaire. I'm not going to do it in this one, but I'll put it out. If you haven't seen my recent October prediction and the next 12 to 13 months in the markets, it's been, as a couple people already said, I nailed it. Now it needs a little time to be, perfect, and I give it a little wiggle room to go one way or the other as well. But what I'd like to do is help you guys. I get asked a lot, as anybody would on a financial. Well, Bruce, what about this fund? Do you like this? Sometimes I don't know the fund. I can go out and research it. Sometimes it doesn't have enough track record. As much as I think I know a lot doing this for 45 years in the stock market, I certainly don't know it all, nor do I know anybody that does. And if anybody tells you they do, run like heck, right? So what I want to ask people is to fill out a little questionnaire and say, what's my what's my age? You can say 30s. You don't have to say I'm 32, and women more than men care, about the age thing. But bottom line, just say I'm 30s, 40s, 50s. When do you want to retire? I've got 20 more working years, 30. So because that makes all the difference in the world. And as much as for a while I like some of these high yield investment funds, I really don't like them in general going forward. If you're going to do a high yield investment fund, I would recommend Roundhill right now, and I would be in the indexes. But honestly, if I only had 6 months to play this, I wouldn't even be in any of these. I would use other vehicles. I would use some Defiance 2X. I would use some Granite shares 2X. 1X, 3X, both bull and bear, based on what I see in the markets coming out. So that's why I'll be asking you guys for some of that stuff. So I want to start doing a lot more. When I say I like gold and the precious metal stocks, I want to show you guys 40 charts. I want to talk about it for 45 minutes and tell you the top things I own, what I project for prices, and have you ask questions relative to that. Then I can talk about oil. I can talk about agriculture. I can talk about other foods. And of course, I'm going to cover Defiance and Roundhill and a little bit on Yieldmax. But before, I was just going crazy every day and I was doing a single thing on, Misty and listen, on BTC, I absolutely love BTC. Think it's got a 20-year run into the multi-millions. But is it going to be volatile if the market sell off 25, 30% in the next 6 to 12 months? Then BTC, well, could happen to it as well. Okay. But am I bullish? Absolutely. But are income funds the way to go? Again, it depends on your time horizon. Guys and girls, they should be a part of your portfolio, not your whole portfolio. It's maniacal to put all your money in there and think that, you're going to make a fortune, that your stock's going to go up 50% and you're going to get 120% annualized yield for the next 20 years. It just doesn't work that way. Sorry to burst your bubble. Okay, guys, that's what I got for you. So you can see here who the real winners are, right? This tells you everything. Now, this is too small a sample size to believe it's going to hold up. This is pretty realistic over 209 trading days, right? That the S&P 500 has less of a NAV loss, also pays a lower distribution. Okay, guys, that's what I got for you. Look forward to some of the other stuff I'll be doing later in the week and on the weekend. All right, this is Bruce with Targeted Wealth Creation. I'm not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. Have a good one, people. Bye for now.